Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor and mother who has hand-selected experts in natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Keri Cooper, who's a licensed social worker and a psychotherapist on children's mental health Uncensored. Keri Cooper, licensed clinical social worker, is the owner of Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy in Northern New Jersey. In her private practice, she counsels teens and works to give them the tools they need to navigate life. Keri takes a holistic approach to therapy, looking at the whole person, not just their symptoms. Keri's the author of Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know. It's a book designed to give parents steps on how to improve their child's mental health. She's a speaker and writer who helps educate teens and parents on the topics teens face in everyday life. She's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and continues to further her education by obtaining additional certifications in her field, one of her favorite pastimes. She's currently working on a follow-up book, which will be a workbook for teens. When Keri isn't busy working with teens, she's busy with her own 4 children and her flock of chickens. Keri can also be spotted falling on the bunny slopes or soaking up the sun on the lake. She can be reached at Keri@KeriCooperHolisticTherapy.com and on Instagram at Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy. Hi, Keri. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So you just published a new book called Children's Mental Health Uncensored, and you're a child psychotherapist that is very passionate about supporting children and teen mental health through holistic lifestyle and habits, healthy habits that will live with that child the rest of their life.
Absolutely. I believe that if you start the good habits when they're young, it's going to help them their entire lifetime.
And
so being able to implement them now really gives them such a better, jump start with life.
It's so true. So let's talk about, you've been doing psychotherapy for a long time. So how have you transitioned? Well, number one, why did you become a child psychotherapist? And number two, how have you transitioned the way you practice over the years?
It's been such a transformation over the last few years. So in the beginning, I really wanted to get into therapy because in high school, I didn't really love school. I wasn't having a great time. I was kind of that moody teenager, and so were my friends. And nobody really had anyone to talk to or to give them guidance on, hey, this is what you should be doing to feel better. So I always kind of knew that was the field I wanted to go into. So I went in a very traditional manner. I went to college and then graduate school and began, working always with kids. That was always my population. And I started working in residentials and group homes and then transitioned to, group practices. And every time I would work with a kid, it's like, all right, they're getting better from your traditional, medication and cognitive behavioral therapy, but they're not 100%. Like, what are we missing here? There's a puzzle piece missing because people should not always have this level of depression and anxiety or ADHD or whatever other issue was happening. And it wasn't until I had my second child that really all the puzzle pieces came together. So my daughter was very young and she had horrendous tantrums, like worse than your normal 2-year-old, tantrums. And after bringing her to every possible doctor and hearing every possible issue and being prescribed every possible medication, one of my friends said to me, I think she has a dairy intolerance. And I was like, you're crazy. You're crazy. But at that point, I would try anything. So I pulled her off dairy and it was life-changing. So then I thought, how many kids are being affected by food? Whether or not it's an intolerance, but just what is food doing to our systems? So I actually went back to school to become a licensed health coach. That way I could learn about food and how that impacts our system. And then the light bulb went off and I said, I need to be doing more holistic care for these clients so they can get 100% better. And that's when I started my own practice. And that's where I am today. And that's why I wrote the book, Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know, because the whole first part of the book is about the physical issues. It's about water and food and sleep and exercise and meditation. Because without those, your body is not going to function properly and you're not going to have an easy time obtaining good mental health.
That's so true. I can actually second the dairy intolerance creating behavioral issues. I've seen it with a few kids in my practice, and then I saw it with my own son when he was 2 years old. And it wasn't all dairy, because I think it was ice cream that was with cow's milk. He would have it and it would be a full blown, like, who is this child, frothing at the mouth, flailing on the floor? And I was like, what? And this was not a typical behavior for him, thank God. So it was such a contrast, and it's disturbing to see that. And for me, I was like, well, he just ate ice cream. And I already had seen that with other kids in my office. So at least I wasn't doubting that. I was immediately like, oh, he can't have ice cream anymore. And we switched him over to like non-dairy milk, ice creams, and he loves them and he does really great with them. And, so, there are these solutions out there, but yeah, I think that's so important. Like, the other thing that we see so much with children with ADHD is chemicals in food, right? That are like colors, are, food colors for flavors. These are all chemicals, and they can be very triggering for certain children and create behavioral issues or attention issues. And I think people really don't even really fully recognize how disruptive it is to that child's brain function. All just the chemicals or environment in general that we see from pollution and, in our air and our water, our food, vaccines. These are all creating stress on the nervous system and will interact with each individual child differently, right? So it's not like a one item equals this behavior or this symptom. It could be a whole plethora of things. And that's what's really great with how you practice, because you're looking at that individual child and being a detective. And what does this individual child's body, mind, which are together, what does that person need to have optimum function? And recognizing that drugs are going to suppress symptoms, but they're not necessarily going to identify root cause and or heal it.
Root cause is so important, because when you discover that there is a root cause to this stuff, then you're empowered to actually be able to change it and not rely on, necessarily taking medicine the rest of your life. Like, you're able to change more than I think people realize.
Yeah. And so this is lifestyle changes, right? So for one child, it might be a food sensitivity or even a full-blown food allergy, right? But for another child, it's something different. Maybe they need to do a heavy metal detox, things like that, right? To help support their brain function. So let's talk about, because I do agree, if we're not addressing that, you can do all the therapy in the world and take medications, and you are not addressing the root cause here.
Right.
And
it's an uphill battle.
And it could be causes. That's the other tricky part of where this detective work comes in. It could be more than one cause for that individual child. And the older the child, potentially the more exposure, the more toxins, and the more, actually at that point, then there's the adaptation of behavior that's come from those years, right? So that's even a deeper layer of the onion to peel back. It's like a younger child. Okay, you take them off dairy and it's done, right? But now what about a teenager? And at this point, then there is going to be needing some sort of, I'm assuming, therapy in addition to these lifestyle changes because of the longevity of the symptoms.
Absolutely. It's a whole combination that you really need to work on in order to feel good. And when you're healthy, your brain's going to function better. So yeah, it's about food. It's about sleep. It's about having good boundaries. It's about being able to say no. It's about, going to the chiropractor and getting adjusted. All of those things come into play.
Right. They all do. And so, let's talk about what your book covers as far as the foundations to have good mental health.
For the mental health side, I really looked at my clients and said, what am I kind of saying day in and day out? What are the issues that are constant? one of the biggest issues that I'm seeing, especially with females, is that they don't say no, even though they want to say no, whether it's to commitments, whether it's to friends. And so many times they're learning this from their parents. You know, you see the moms who are just completely burnt out, who are saying yes to everything, even though they don't enjoy it. And they're not setting up good boundaries for themselves. So that's something that I really go into, is that our kids need to be able to set their own boundaries and limits and say no. They don't need to do every activity in the world. They don't need to hang out with friends if they don't want to at that moment.
Right.
And that goes into also not feeling like you're responsible for everyone else's feelings. And unfortunately, we're really teaching that to children, that they're responsible for how other people feel. It's not really true. And that's a huge amount of pressure to put on them.
So let's really, and I'm all about that root cause. So you mentioned very briefly how parents are modeling that behavior. So where did the parents learn that from?
So interesting.
Right?
And it's funny because like every generation you see parents do things differently. And I think the generation of parents that I'm talking about, their parents were not overly involved in the schools. Their parents were like, see ya. Mm-hmm. So this generation has almost done the opposite, and they are so involved in every detail of their children's lives. It's not healthy. And then these kids go off to college. They have no idea how to function.
Right. Why is that? Why are parents behaving in generally as a culture? Why is that? What created that?
I don't know if there's one thing that you could spot to that. But right now, I mean, I think the parents are also such in competition with other parents that they want to make sure their child is, you know, what class are you doing? What grade did you get? You know, is your homework done perfectly? How many activities are you going to get into? We're in this society where, you know, it's very important for parents to say what college their kids got into.
So it's like an ego thing.
Completely.
Wow.
Completely.
So it's almost like, okay, I'm going to look good as a parent and or person. My identification as an adult is dependent on how excellent my child is with college, how many languages they speak, if they're a star, athlete, yada, yada. That's very interesting. And I agree that I would say my parents didn't put their identity. They were proud of me, right, for accomplishments, but that was very different. There was a separation with me and them. It wasn't like we were like one, right?
Right. And that's the issue that's happening right now. They are like one.
Wow.
Such an unhealthy relationship. You need boundaries.
Boundaries. We're all individuals. Even a baby is its own individual and its own identity.
Yes. So I think that's one of the issues. And then what children have really learned from all of this is that they can't do anything on their own. Like when you do everything for your child, you're telling them, I don't trust you to do this on your own. So kids also have really low self-esteem right now because half of them don't even think that they could do their own laundry or cook a meal because their parents haven't allowed them to.
Oh, that's interesting. So, yeah, this is important that with independence, right? That as a child, you learn how to do things for yourself and become, a young adult, which you don't wait till you go to college to learn these things, right?
But unfortunately, that's what's happening. So that's why in December, my phone rings off the hook from all the college kids who have really failed out after their first semester. Because they're not academically able to do this, but because they couldn't take care of themselves.
Wow. Right. Oh, well, so that's really sad for me to even just think about. Like, we're teaching our children to fail.
We're setting them up for failure.
Yeah.
By not pushing them more and letting them be more independent when they're younger.
So at what age does that start?
I always say...
My son's almost 5, so I'm learning right now.
Yeah, I always say the moment they could physically, safely do something for themselves, they should be able to do it. So I have 4 children, 8, 10, 13, and 15. All of my children do their own laundry. And
wow.
I always use laundry because it's the best example. Laundry is something that parents, the moment your child can physically get it into the washer machine and into the dryer, they should be able to do it, even with a step stool. My daughter was using a step stool for the last 2 years before she was able to, have the right height. But laundry is something that they have to pre-plan. They have to know, oh, my laundry basket's getting full. So it takes some brain power here. It takes planning. And it takes okay, well, Saturday I'm not doing much, so let me do my laundry then. And it's one of those things that you don't need to argue with your child about, because if they don't do their laundry, then they're just running out of clothes. And it's a natural consequence. And trust me when I tell you, my children have run out of clean clothes. And then they learn.
Wow. It's a lesson.
But it's a safe way for them to fail if they didn't pre-plan, because they're just wearing something dirty. It's not the end of the world.
I love it. So you know what I'm thinking? That's a lot of people trying to use the washer and dryer. Is there ever a scheduling conflict?
So my schedule is, my day is Thursday. Everybody else get out of the room on Thursday, and they all figure it out then amongst themselves.
Oh, do they have their own days?
They don't. They just seem to, however it is, figure it out.
Okay. Wow.
I did see one of my kids running with her laundry basket because she knew somebody else was trying to get in there.
Right. So she's like, I got to beat them. So they do their own wash. They know how to not shrink their clothes. They know how to, my new nanny who's turning 21 was like, oh, I just learned how to do laundry a couple of years ago. I was like, this is how you do our laundry, because I need help with mine. I'm like, do not wash it in hot water and do not dry it on high heat.
Yeah, they've all figured it out. And, my 13-year-old who is wearing some clothing that, can't be put in the dryer, she knows. But she also knows that if she ruins it, that doesn't mean we're running out the next day and buying new stuff for her.
Right. Wow. So I love these rules, structure. Children thrive with structure because it helps them feel safe, right? They know what the expectations are.
Yes.
And like you said, if you don't follow the rules, then there are consequences. All right. That's a great example. Do they help out with cooking at home too?
So they all make their own lunches. I don't deal with their lunches. They make them. I kind of, on Sunday, if I'm going grocery shopping, it's what do you guys want me to get? Okay. And then they take it from there. I have no idea, I'll be honest with you, what they pack for lunch. But everything I buy is healthy and appropriate. So
it's good.
It doesn't matter.
A bunch of junk food because that's not in the house.
Right. So they do that. And then some of my older kids have been cooking a little bit. And that's something that we're, as a family, trying to figure out a schedule to get them more involved in.
Right. Yeah, it was cute. My son recently was getting interested in helping me cut up a cucumber. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to hand him a knife by himself, but we can do it together. And it, it's very interesting at this age. He's very interested in helping. Like he wants to help. And actually when there's times like my husband and I were moving a rug, it was like he wanted to help, but it was like there's, some things that he can't really help with yet. Right. But he was very upset about that. So it was like, okay, how do we give him another task that's safe, that he can still feel like he's a part of the family help?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's always looking for ways to incorporate them into the family. And, I think that also goes into, I don't love people giving their kids money for chores, because I'm a big believer that you're doing chores, really you're just helping out the family.
Right.
So I don't have like a chore chart. We don't have like, these are your assigned chores. Well, besides my son who has to take out the garbage. But it's normally like, hey, I need help, go empty the dishwasher. Or you clean up after yourself by anytime you use a plate, you put it in the dishwasher, don't leave it in the sink. So those are kind of like our established rules that you just need to do this to help out because we're a family unit.
Right.
And just like I help you out by driving you all over the place and doing whatever you need to help me out too.
Right. So I recently had another guest on who wrote a book about teaching children about finances, which was an excellent book. And she was talking about the family, a personal bank that you have within the family. And it wasn't like you said necessarily like you get money for chores, but there was like an allowance as being a member of the family. And then it was to help kids keep track of their finances. And then if they wanted a toy, the money was coming out of their bank and they had to subtract it on the ledger and everything. So how do you guys manage finances in your home?
So my older son is now working. Like he's
Right.
gotten a job since he was young. The moment he was able to be a soccer ref, he started doing that. And a lifeguard now too. My daughter, she normally needs to go like above and beyond with something around the house to get money. Actually, lots of times she helps me and she'll do my social media posts for me and I'll pay her for that.
That's helpful.
That is. But she also is pretty good with saving money that she gets for her birthday from family or from Christmas. And they kind of use it that way.
And they have an actual checking account or savings account with a bank?
Yes.
Okay. And then what about the younger ones who don't have accounts yet with the bank?
The younger ones, I mean, we really don't buy much stuff. So like if we're on vacation, they all know it's like, all right, you get one souvenir. So figure out what you're going to have.
Right.
So we do it more that way with the younger kids. But the older ones, you know, they're now out with their friends and need money.
Yeah, which is great. And yeah, that's important too. I mean, talk a little bit about kids working, like especially out of the house, right? Like,
I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love when kids have jobs. And really very few of them these days, I think, do.
Really?
And it's because they're so overscheduled. And a lot of times parents are saying, well, they can't have a job because their homework and then their extracurriculars, and they need all this stuff to get into college. And yes, that's true, but there's also a huge value in working and having a job and having to be somewhere at a certain time.
Yeah, there is. So how do you manage that as a teenager?
I think, you know, you have to also look at how many extracurriculars are you doing and what is the purpose of all of them? I think kids are really overly scheduled at this point, and I think they have such pressure to get into college. You know, if they have good grades, they're getting into a college. But we have this now fixation on, well, it has to be a good college. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know what that means, because I think any college, it's more what you do while you're at college, not necessarily the name of your college. So I think sometimes we're almost feeding these kids these lies that your life is going to be good as long as you get into a good name college.
Right. Like that's going to be the key to get the job and the money and blah, blah, blah. It's quite superficial, actually. So it isn't about like what you actually learn in school, like and that really, you know, college, like a lot of the classes I took in college, I don't use those in my daily life at this point. I don't use them as a chiropractor. You know what I mean? Like
same with me. Yeah.
Take these random, you know, biology, chemistry, physics classes. Anyways, so what did I learn in college? Yeah, I had to learn that stuff. I had to memorize it. I don't remember any of it. I don't use calculus in my life on a regular basis, but I learned a lot of life skills in college, and that set me up as an adult, right? I mean, so and like to your point, you can learn that at any college.
Right. Right. So, you know, unfortunately, these kids are just feeling such pressure, and it's for what? For what? That's what I always say to them.
So when you're dealing with you doing therapy with a child and or adult, how do you incorporate the parent into that? Because clearly the parent is part of the solution here.
100%. So I always meet with the parents as well. And we talk about the things that they could be doing at home, such as, you know, making sure there's healthy food in the house, you know, cooking with your child. Like those are really life skills that they need, and it sets the foundation for good health. And I also tell the parents, like, you need to model the behavior. So if you're sitting in your living room on your phone, playing games on your phone for hours, that's what your child is seeing.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much you tell them to get off their phone. They're seeing you do it. So I always tell parents, like, have a book in your living room. Sit down and read a book. Show them what you're doing in your spare time. A lot of it's about modeling.
Yeah, or they're just scrolling Instagram or whatever else. Yeah, so I think that is very interesting. And then essentially you're asking parents to change their lifestyle. How does that go over?
I think it's almost harder for the parents to change than it is the kids sometimes, because the parents are very set into their routine.
Yeah.
And I think for them, they don't even realize how much better they'll feel once they change it. And that, you know, I tell parents a lot, like, go out for a walk with your child. Just like walk around the block, get some sun, get some fresh air. This is all important.
It really is.
Engaging in those types of behaviors leads to a healthier lifestyle.
It does. And there's also then the actual connection with the parent and child that you're not going to get when there's a screen involved, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yes. That's why family dinners are so important. You need to sit down and connect.
Right.
Especially during COVID, everyone was like roommates, like everyone was home. But so many times they're all just off in their own room on their devices.
So, how have you seen the pandemic impact children and teenagers' mental health?
It has really blown up mental health. Mental health wasn't doing well beforehand. And then you add COVID in, and it was truly a disaster. Every therapist I was friends with, we were completely overbooked. I mean, we couldn't get enough kids. And that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book over COVID just to give some type of skills and supports to parents because I couldn't get them all into my office.
Yeah. I mean, I know practitioners still have waiting lists.
Yes.
Which is
100%.
horrendous. Like these kids are just suffering without any support.
Right. I mean, there was so much just grief and loss. I mean, these kids were losing sports. They were losing time with their friends. They were losing a normal classroom environment. And then this constant like anxiety was creeping up because they never knew what to expect. It was like, am I in school tomorrow? Am I going to be quarantined tomorrow? Am I going to be able to have a football season? They never knew. So when you basically take all this control out of their hands, that's really hard to deal with. And I think they're really still suffering from that. It was really traumatic. Like, let's call it for what it was. COVID was traumatic.
It was.
And that's not just going to disappear because we're kind of back to normal at this point.
And I would say it's still not necessarily normal. I still see people walking around wearing masks and it's kind of like normal, but not really. It's right. It's still different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So even when it does return completely to normal, the trauma is still living within these kids.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't even have the words to express that this was sad. This was grief and loss. Like they were upset.
Right. Okay. So it happened. It's still kind of happening. How do we do? How can parents help support their child? Especially, let's admit that parents also had their own trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
it's like just a bunch of traumatized people globally, really.
Yes.
That's what's weird about it. It's not like, it was just one town or just one country, like the whole world.
It's a global trauma. So, how do you handle trauma? And it's, being able to talk about it and process it and call it for what it was. That, yes, this was traumatic and it was sad and it was hard not knowing what was going to happen the next day. And being able to now look at the life and say, okay, well, now we kind of know what's going to happen day to day. Like we're now a little bit safer and bringing it back to the present moment that this is now different and we're working on everything. And I think it's always also important to take away lessons learned. Like what have you learned from that time period that you want to change in your life? For my family, it was, we didn't realize how much we missed vacationing. So now I'm like, all right, where are we going? Like, let's really jump into this because we weren't able to. We weren't able to see Broadway shows for a while. And now it's like, okay, what have we missed that we need to see? So trying to, not take anything for granted anymore, I think is a really big lesson from this.
I completely agree with that. The other thing was I also really got recognized what I put in my schedule because part of me was overscheduled. Certainly that was probably applicable to a lot of families. And once my schedule was cleared, I got to decide what I put back in and be more conscious and aware of what I actually enjoy doing and what I want to put on my schedule, as opposed to, well, I've been doing this every week for years, so I'm just going to keep doing it, right? It was almost like mindless.
Yes. And that was so important, figuring out what you like and what you don't like. One of the hardest things with COVID was that the kids had nothing to do because they're constantly just scheduled with outside activities. So when I would ask, like, well, what's your hobby? What do you like to do? They all looked at me with like blank faces. Nobody knew. So some kids actually really did great and they developed hobbies. They started learning to play the guitar on their own, not because the teacher was coming to a house. They started cooking, not because they were going to a cooking class, but because they were doing it. And I think those are the activities that this generation is really missing out on, doing stuff just on your own by yourself. opposed to constantly being in a structured class or environment.
So one of your foundations I know is meditation. And what you just mentioned, I feel like cooking and music can be meditative, especially when it is just like free flowing, individual, like you're just doing your thing. You're really in that present moment.
Yes.
And so that is a form of meditation. So I can see why that would be so valuable for mental health. How do you teach children to meditate?
Well, many times it's, again, finding what puts them in that present moment, because that's the whole goal of meditation, to be in the present. When you're in the present, you're not feeling anxiety about the future or depression about the past.
Right.
So, and most of these kids are now constantly living in the future. So that's why the anxiety is so high. So I also tell them, it's great to just go outside and like look at clouds, take a walk and realize what sounds you're hearing and what you're seeing. Just be in the moment. So it's not always a formal, meditation of them laying down with their eyes closed and listening to, music or a guided meditation. Sometimes it's just being able to be present in whatever they're doing.
Yeah. And I think nature is so helpful for that as well. That's just, getting out of the EMF and the overstimulation and just like grounding into Mother Earth.
Yeah, walking around outside barefoot and just feeling the earth. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so important. And that counts as a meditation. I think a lot of people kind of don't really give that enough credit with how healing that is for our mental health.
Yes.
And physical health.
Yes.
What are some of the other foundations? You briefly mentioned nutrition and sleep.
Everybody is dehydrated. Yeah. That's another huge issue. Especially the kids I work with, it's like some of them literally drink no water at all. And I think that we forget that we have to be hydrated in order for everything in our body to function correctly.
Yes.
And, lots of times when I have kids in my office with anxiety or depression or ADHD, there's also some physical stuff going on. There's normally like rashes or stomach problems or migraines. Like, it's never really just mental health. There's always some other stuff happening as well. And unfortunately, so much of it has just become normal. Like,
right, it's not normal.
They have asthma. It's fine. They have, allergies. It's fine. Massive stomach issues. I don't know when this all became normal, to be perfectly honest.
No, none of
I'm sure you see this all the time as well.
I do. Normal is common and normal have become the same word, and they're clearly very different words.
Right. So that's been a huge struggle, is that they just think it's fine and it's not fine.
No, it's not fine. No, any of these symptoms are the body's way of saying, hey, there's an imbalance and it needs to be addressed. And just because it's common does not make it normal. Even honestly, children on the spectrum is just more and more and more common, not normal. And the biggest thing, I had a podcast guest recently who shared with me how the CDC changed the guidelines around milestone development the first year of life and first 2 years of life. And, because the average was now getting pushed and delayed, they actually moved the milestones instead of recognizing that's really upsetting to me, because that is indicative of how much our children are needing support, especially these first couple years of life, right? That's foundational, is setting these children up from the very beginning. Because if that doesn't happen, sure, you're going to see a child 5, 7, 10 who has all these different diagnoses, right? Because you have to look at what type of pregnancy was there and the type of birth and that child's health, their first couple years of life, when their brain was doubling in size that first year. I mean, all of this, right? And if it's after the fact, you just address what you can. But, I also really am, because I take care of a lot of perinatal women, I'm very interested in educating women about what they can do to create a healthy baby and make sure that child is on a normal milestone development, because that is indicative of the child's nervous system and their computer and what type of stressors are on that child's nervous system.
Yes. And, I was talking about kids being really overscheduled and not having enough, free play. That's happening at the younger level as well. I mean, kids are now in preschool, like full days in structured activities, opposed to just being able to play. And even when they're really young, now it's like they're on iPads for quote unquote educational, TV. They shouldn't be on an iPad all day at that age. I mean, really at any age, but especially early on.
Right. Right. Well, because especially with screens, and I see this with my own son, it's very addictive of how it wires the brain. And you'll see this with kids. It's like, okay, it's time to turn off the show. And it's like tantrum, like you're taking away, a piece of candy, right? And that concerns me. You see that with video games in older children, where it does literally create a dopamine response. And then you're literally wiring that brain to have that, I need more, I need more, I need more. And then that can like even progress to recreational drugs and
absolutely
and other addictive type behavior.
Right. Because they feel so flat almost when they don't have that type of stimulation. And that's why you're seeing so many kids with social media. It's like every time they get a like, their brain is like lighting up. Oh, someone likes me. Oh, someone liked my post. And then when they don't have that, it's like life seems so dull because they're not used to just experiencing the normal stuff.
Right. Wow. I mean, and I can't even imagine being a teenager with social media because there was no social media when I was a teenager. There were no cell phones. There was none of that. So how do parents help support children that, even it's like, oh my God, I'm like afraid of like when my son's going to say, everybody in my class has a cell phone. Why don't I have a cell phone? And I'm going to be the bad mommy, right? Because I'm like, no, let's wait. You have the rest of your life to have a cell phone. So, that's hard, right?
It is hard because you have to be realistic as well, and not isolate your child from society, which at this point they are isolated from society if they don't have a phone at a certain age. We're always the longest holdouts as well for our kids getting cell phones. So my kids are always the last one in their grades to get one. None of my kids, we don't do iPads really. It's like, okay, a cell phone is something that's more of like a necessity. So that's kind of where we go with it. And my kids also have a rule where at nighttime, when it's bedtime, the cell phones are not in their bedroom ever. And I actually write a lot about that in my book. And I write a lot of scary stuff of what's actually happening at 2 a.m. when your child has a cell phone in their room. And you need to really support your kid and their sleep, especially, but also their mental health. And you need to kind of be the bad guy and put rules into place and say, phones are not in the bedroom. But I also, for myself, my phone is on do not disturb at night. I don't care what emergency is happening. If it's a massive emergency, someone's going to track me down.
Right. That's right. My cell phone's not in my bedroom. My husband keeps his right next to the bed and in like airplane mode, because of the whole EMF and how that impacts our sleep. But yeah.
But that goes back to boundaries, setting boundaries. You don't need to be available for your friend at 2 o'clock in the morning because they're having a crisis, which is what's happening.
That's what's happening?
That's absolutely what's happening.
Holy crap. So where's your kids' cell phones? Do you like lock them up?
No, we have them in the kitchen. Like everything kind of charges in my kitchen and that's where everything is.
Got it. And then first thing in the morning, are they after they use the bathroom, are they running to get their phone or?
So only my older two have a phone. Only my 13 and 15-year-old do. And my 15-year-old will definitely check his because honestly, a lot of stuff comes in through school as well. Like, oh, there's a meeting. Like the schools are using these. Wow. This is how they're updated. So it's like me checking my work email in the morning. They do need to check their stuff. Schools at this point are also like for activities posting a lot of stuff on Instagram. Like we don't love social media. My 13-year-old still does not have social media. My 15-year-old does have Instagram because so much of his stuff is on Instagram.
Wow. That's mind blowing. So it's not even like you're like, okay, you can't have an Instagram account.
Right. And then Snapchat is the other big issue because that's how they all communicate. So if you don't have Snapchat, no one's reaching out to you. So I don't always consider Snapchat like a social media one because it's more they're just talking. But that is something that is like, unfortunately, especially in high school, like a necessary evil at this point.
Why can't they just text message?
They don't text.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they just don't text.
I don't know much about the current
It's so weird. They don't text. They don't call ever. Like,
yeah, they
calling?
don't call. Yeah. Yeah. That's too personal.
Right. We made my daughter one time recently. We're like, can you call the pizza place and like order a pizza? It was like a Friday night. We're like, let's do a movie night and something fun. And she's like, you want me to call? I'm like, uh-huh. And she was like, hi. I'm like, life skills, pick up a phone.
Life skills. We do need to know how to call people. And, wow. I do think that, so like, how does that, like these teenagers are becoming adults, struggling maybe in college. And then what about in the workforce?
So I see a lot of kids right out of college, like in their early 20s who are now transitioning to the workforce. And I still work with that age group because there's a lot going on for them. And I think one of the biggest issues they have, and it's really interesting, they constantly have this fear and anxiety that they're not doing well in their job. They're just, constantly fearful of it. And it's because they're not getting like a grade. Like they're so used to having their entire existence validated based on grades in school. So it's, yes, you got an A today. It's like, okay, I did well. They don't know how to judge themselves or their performances anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I don't even know what to say to that.
But it makes sense. Like when they're so used to working so hard to get to the next level, to get into a good college, to get, into AP classes, and everything is based on grades. And that's how they know if they're doing well or not. It's never like, well, I worked really hard, even though I got a B. Like, it's like, no, I have to have an A. I have to have an A. And that's their judgment. So when they're at work and nobody is telling them on a daily basis, how are you doing with an A or a B? They don't know how they're doing.
Right. So that definitely must go back to like self-esteem and self-worth, and not really, and self-confidence, and really saying like, I know I'm doing a great job. And if there's constructive criticism coming in from a boss, also, this is interesting to be able to manage that without being like personally offended or crying, and just being like, okay, this person's, they're not yelling at me. They're just saying, this is where you can improve. And that's an important life skill as well. We have to be open to constructive criticism.
It is, but the only way we're able to be open to that is when in the past we've had experiences where we've failed and we've picked ourselves back up and it's been okay. And these kids are in a bubble where they're not basically allowed to fail.
Yeah. And that's definitely not, realistic, because we all fail. And that's how we learn, right? These are like, and then if you're not learning from that failure, then, or even having the ability to fail, then there's very little growth, in my opinion.
Right. And, we now have school districts where if a kid gets below an 80, they're like allowed to retake the test. I don't know why we think a 75, we need to retake a test. Like just take the 75, know to study better the next time. They're not helping these kids.
Oh, I didn't hear about that either.
Yeah, we have a few school districts around us that if it's below an 80, they get to retake it immediately.
And it replaces their previous score.
Yes.
And that must all go back to having a certain GPA and college admission. And
yes.
It seems
and
a
it's
little
sad
fraudulent.
because, we sit here and then, the high schools are always, oh, look at what schools our kids got into, what colleges, wonderful and great. My question is always, and in 4 years, did they graduate from those colleges? The transfer rate goes up and up. Like more and more kids are transferring into different colleges because their first college, they're not able to make it in.
Oh, they get in and then they're not successful there.
Right. I mean, we have inflated these kids' grades at this point. I mean, I look at some of the things that my son will like do for school and I'm like, how did you get like an A on this? I'm like, this work is not great. Like, where's our standard all of a sudden?
That goes back to the milestones I was just mentioning.
Yes.
So we're like shifting, instead of holding that same level of expectation, with physical and or mental development, we're like, okay, everyone's doing a little bit worse, so we'll just move the bar there,
Right.
And that's
And forget ever giving a kid an F. Like, I just don't even think it almost happens anymore. Like, it's so rare.
Wow.
So we're setting these kids up to essentially fail. Like, that's what we've created.
Well, that's just very sad. So, I mean, I think what I love about your book is that anybody can read it. It's written for lay people. Parent can read this, learn how to really incorporate healthy family habit, lifestyle. And by the way, mom and dad are going to feel better and have better health physically and mentally and emotionally by having awareness of their sleep quality and quantity, their hydration, their diet, their exercise, their stress management, right?
Absolutely.
All of the things. And I think it's also amazing when you can have families doing this together, because they're all, I see that in my office. When a whole family comes into my office and gets adjusted, they're all leaving with an optimized nervous system. And that is not only going to help their family unit, it's going to help them individually in all of their functionality as well.
Yes, it's so important to do it as a family unit. That's the way to really make a good change.
Right. So that's also the interesting thing. Like when you took your second child off dairy, did the whole house go dairy free?
At that point, I only had my son, and he doesn't like dairy, to be honest. He doesn't eat it.
What about you and your husband?
My husband honestly doesn't eat it either. And I did put a little bit in my coffee every morning because I am hooked on that.
Okay. You didn't switch to the macadamia nut milk.
I have tried every milk substitute, by the way, because I would love to get off the dairy. That's like my one struggle. I do my organic, dairy creamer, and I'm like, I need to get off it. And that's been the one thing that's been the hardest for me to deal with in my life, is finding a new creamer that tastes good.
There's some good ones out there. I go to get mine at Whole Foods.
We just had a Whole Foods open up by us, so we're very excited.
Yeah, they have some good options and unique, right? Like for milk, you want something, with coffee, you want something creamy. So like coconut cream is like lends itself to that, as opposed to something like thin, like a rice milk that's not going to cut it for creaming up your coffee. So anyways, any last thoughts you want to share with the audience?
I just want people to know that their mental health is more in their power than they think it is. I don't want people to throw their hands up and be like, well, my kid's just depressed. Well, they're just anxious. Like, there's stuff you can do about it.
I have one last question. Out of these children you're helping with depression and anxiety, what's the percentage of one of the parents or both parents also having depression and anxiety?
It's pretty high.
Yeah. So I think sometimes too, it's like they're looking and they're like, oh, I want to help my child. I can see they're depressed. I can see they're anxious, and they're not really having that self-reflection of how their mental health also could be improved.
Right. They need to work on themselves as well. It impacts the whole energy of the house. It impacts everything.
Yeah, I can really see that, which is why it's great that these lifestyle habits can be applied to every member of the family, and everybody will feel better with
Absolutely.
that. Awesome. Well, Keri, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my interview today with Keri. She is full of knowledge and information, and I love how she really combines the mind-body connection, especially for children and teenagers, in recognizing that their nervous system needs support to optimally function. And that includes just basic healthy lifestyle foundations like water, sleep, food, exercise, and meditation. And how we all need that. And that includes our children. And as parents, it's our responsibility to set our children up for success by making sure that those basic healthy habits are happening on a regular basis. So it was refreshing to talk about the whole child, and how also as parents that we can be modeling that type of lifestyle and behavior. And when we do it together as a family, we have the best success in following through with actually executing those healthy habits and lifestyle. So I hope you enjoyed it and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.